Greetings everyone and welcome to No BS Baking. This is JP and today is the first time since I started this channel that thanks to the recent release of the Baking Assistant and all the base information it contains, now I can focus on digging into the details of ingredients, processes, and baking science, rather than running around in circles trying to correct or provide information that I commonly see online. Today I'm going to start with a comprehensive overview on wheat flour to hopefully answer all your questions and maybe provide information you may not even have thought about. Flour is the single most important ingredient in baking, so let's get into it. Bread flour, a staple ingredient in kitchens around the world, has a rich history that intertwines with the evolution of human civilization. The origins of bread can be traced back to ancient Mesopotamia, around 10,000 BC. Where early agricultural societies began cultivating wild grains. These grains were ground into a coarse meal and mixed with water to form a rudimentary dough, which was then baked on hot stones. The discovery of yeast, either from the environment or a result of accidental fermentation, marked a significant milestone in bread making, leading to the development of leavened bread. The Egyptians were credited with discovering this process somewhere between 1000 and 4000 BC, depending on where you look. Greeks and Romans further refined these techniques, introducing mills for grinding grains more efficiently. During the Middle Ages, bread making became a skilled craft, with bakers forming guilds and perfecting their recipes. The introduction of hard wheat gave rise to what we know as bread flour. This type of flour, essential for achieving the chewy, elastic texture of modern bread, became widely available with the advent of industrial milling in the 19th century. Today, bread flour remains a key ingredient in baking, reflecting a long history of innovation and culinary tradition. There are many species and subspecies of grains that may fall into the same family. Some have evolved to become the wheats we know today through naturally occurring hybridization and later through human-driven genetic modification. And most of the flours used today for bread making and even many of the other ancient wheats originated as hybrids of ancient grains such as einkorn, durum, emmer, and triticum estivum. Wheat varieties are grouped into market classes based on kernel hardness. You got the hard versus soft, red versus white, winter versus spring. For bread flour, hard red and hard white wheats are preferred due to their higher protein levels. These wheat varieties are often blended to create flour with varying protein levels, milling attributes, and overall characteristics required by bakers to produce a wide range of products. This blending process ensures that flour meets specific criteria for texture, strength, and elasticity, making it suitable for baking everything from delicate pastries to hearty breads. The point here is if you want the best product, be sure to use the flour that's best suited for what you're making. The reference provided in the assistant is an excellent place to look when thinking about the flour you're planning to bake with. Here you will see common protein percents for flour sold under these names around the world. Whatever flour you decide to use, it should fall generally into these ranges. Gluten strength is an indication of the quantity, quality, and balance of the gluten-forming proteins in these flour. Having an idea of the strength you can expect is important when planning mix times, and total protein is important for keying in on the potential hydration requirements. These high to low comments may seem obvious, but they're subject to additional factors. We will get into this more in mixing and hydration modules, but here is a small chart that provides more of a visual reference for how total protein may not reflect gluten protein and how the milling affects both mix times and hydration. Example, whole wheat flour can have more total protein than all-purpose and a similar amount of gluten protein, yet mix times are less and hydration is increased. Wise ancient wheat can have much more total protein, much less gluten protein, requiring much less mix, but much more water. For now, let's look at some common flour variations used in baking. Now, while these might not reflect every type of flour that bakers use to make bakery items, White flour, brown flour, whole grain flour, and germ flour are all commonly used in bread baking. Theoretically, all wheat flour, including ancient wheats, can and often are milled to these general specifications. Now let's look at some general rules when working with flour. As the protein content increases, the hydration increases. As the amount of quality gluten in the flour increases, the hydration increases and the mix times go up. Therefore, if the gluten percent decreases, mix times go down. But what about hydration? Not necessarily. So what this is saying is that basically when the bran is reduced or removed from flour, hydration is reduced, and mix times are generally increased due to the higher concentration of endosperm. Common sense, really. The more bran, the less endosperm, the hydration is increased due to the absorption capabilities of the bran, and mix times are reduced due to the lower amount of endosperm and abrasive action of the bran on gluten. And lastly, most flours have a moisture content of around 11 to 14%. But if your storage conditions are dry and cool, then your flour may lose some moisture and take up more water when you bake. If your climate is warm and humid, your flour may not take up as much water. This is why storage conditions are so important, and we'll talk about this a little later on in the video. When water is mixed with flour, a series of physical and chemical reactions occur, leading to the formation of a dough or batter. Initially, the water hydrates the flour particles, causing them to swell and absorb the moisture. This hydration process activates the bacteria naturally present in flour, as well as the proteins gluten and gliadin. Lactobacillus bacteria is naturally present in flour and produces amylase enzymes, just like most all living organisms. Amylase breaks down carbohydrates like starch into the disaccharide maltose. From here, another naturally occurring enzyme, maltase, then converts maltose into the simple sugar, glucose. Glucose is easily metabolized by bacteria, whereby they produce lactic and acetic acid, and some CO2 as a byproduct. These acids, besides adding flavor to the dough, lower the pH, creating a more ideal environment for yeast to thrive in while simultaneously conditioning the gluten by breaking it down, creating a softer, more relaxed structure that improves both handling of the dough and its gas retention capabilities. And as you can see here, yeast operates similarly to bacteria, with the exception of producing much more carbon dioxide and ethanol as its main byproduct, contributing to the distinct fermentation flavors in bread. The synergistic interaction between yeast and bacteria provides essential components for achieving well-risen, flavorful bread products. Now, this is not a video on mixing, but I want to make note there are many resources online about the importance of avoiding overkneading, while others claim mixing is a waste of time. The reality is that overkneading dough is very difficult with modern wheat flour. Yet, due to the misinformation, many people are worried about doing exactly that. And as shown here, look to the web for solutions to a problem that they most likely don't even have. And the home baker experts love to offer their overmixing recommendations. Short, the Fourier curve scientifically confirms exactly what I'm saying. Modern milling is a process that involves the use of advanced technology and equipment to convert wheat into flour efficiently and consistently. It incorporates a series of steps that include cleaning, conditioning, grinding, sifting, and purifying wheat to produce flour with specific characteristics suitable for various bakery products. Modern mills have the technology to create good performing flours from medium quality wheats through one or more of these processes. Blending, combining different wheat species or different crops to achieve balanced protein. By adjusting and optimizing extraction rates, they can produce higher quality flours. Many millers blend additives and enzymes directly to the flour to improve dough conditioning, fermentation, and overall baking performance. There are many additives that you may have seen on your flower label and wondered what they are. Included in the flower expansion module is a complete list of the most common additives, their functions, and how and what they will do in your dough. Save yourself time, frustration, and problematic product by understanding the functions of these additives and how they affect process time in easy to understand language, provided right here in the Home Baking Assistant. This topic is basically a non-starter for many of you, as a growing list of countries have banned bleached flour due to the apparent health concerns. However, I will make the following points. I think most bakers will agree that when it comes to making tender baked goods like cakes, cookies, pastry, bleached flour was or often is preferred. Bright white color and changes to the protein structure, providing a nice softer feel and texture to the product. Unbleached flour, on the other hand, often produces products with a bit denser texture and often slightly off-white color. The trade-off for using unbleached flour was a better retention of the nutrients, and of course no chlorine gas or benzoyl peroxide to clutter up the ingredient label and potentially contribute to health issues for people actually consuming the products. Home baking with ancient wheat flours is becoming more and more popular. These grains are often higher in nutrients compared to modern wheat varieties, containing more protein, fiber, and essential minerals like magnesium and zinc. Ancient wheat flours are also less likely to be genetically modified, making them appealing to those seeking more natural and traditional ingredients. Additionally, they tend to have a richer, more complex flavor profile, which can enhance the taste of baked goods, adding a unique depth and character that is often missing in products made with conventional wheat flours. However, baking with ancient wheat flours also presents certain challenges. These flours often have different gluten structures compared to modern wheat, which can affect the texture, elasticity, and hydration requirements of the dough. They often produce denser, less airy baked goods when used as a 100% replacement. Therefore, you'll probably note that many recipes blend these flours with modern bread flour in efforts of optimizing rise and texture of the products. As noted previously, this difference in gluten structure requires careful hydration and mix time planning, as high protein in many of these flours may not translate into necessarily good baking performance. When planning to use ancient wheats in your recipe, I recommend the following. Check the protein content to gluten strength guidelines to get a feel for the mix time you should consider and how much rise potential or quality gluten you can expect in the flour. Secondly, use the protein to hydration calculator to determine a good start point when using these flours as a 100% replacement, or even if you're blending with modern wheats as demonstrated here. This calculator is fantastic for establishing a solid base hydration start point for a broad range of flours. Now, it took me over a week of researching absorption factors to apply to each of the wheats based on a broad range of protein variables around the world. Now, I'm pleased to offer it to you. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into proper storage, as most really just common sense. However, here's the highlights. Store your flour in an airtight container so it doesn't lose moisture or gain it if you're in a humid environment. Cool, dry location away from heat. Refrigerating flour is a good idea if you have to have the space and don't bake too much. Freezing is ideal if you purchased a lot of flour and bake only a few times per year. Whole grain flours contain germ, which is rich in natural fats, so they tend to spoil, rancidity, quicker, so if you got the room, refrigerate them. Here are some basic guidelines regarding shelf life expectations, assuming you're following the previous noted recommendations. Potentially long before your flour actually goes rancid, you may note these little buggers crawling around in your flour. Now, they may have come from something in your pantry, but more often than not, they were in your flour from the get-go. Not the actual weevil, but its eggs, laying there dormant until the conditions and time was just right. The reality is, it's really unavoidable. Now, that's not saying that if you open your flour bag and see them crawling around, that's normal. It's not. Now, this is why I like to store my flour in the refrigerator as a rule. Those eggs may be in there, but they're going to have a heck of a time hatching at 4 degrees Celsius. Flour is milled to particle size based on applications it's intended. Fine milled flour is your cake and pastry flours, and even Italian 00 flour for some pasta and pizza applications. Medium encompasses most bread and all-purpose flours, but can include some fine milled whole wheat or brown flour mixes. On the coarse side, you have many whole grain flour, stone ground, coarse rye, and wheat meals. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the milling size directly influences mix times, hydration, and baking performance. So it's always good to have a plan for the flour you want to use. I didn't have time to cover off absolutely everything in the flour module, but I got most of it. Now, if you're serious about baking, then I highly recommend getting the Baking Assistant. It'll save you time wading through piles of online videos and resources that may or may not actually be correct or work based on your ingredients or your environmental conditions. Quickly and easily reference information, processes, and recipe planning that will elevate your knowledge and baking success.